The Senzo Meyiwa murder trial is expected to continue this morning at the High Court in Pretoria, with police officer Thabo Mosia back on the stand. Mosia was one of the first police officers that was called to the Meyiwa crime scene at Kelly Khumalo's mother's home in Vosloorus, east of Johannesburg. 5 men are on trial for the murder of the soccer star who was shot dead in 2014. Our reporter Crisaldo Lewis is joining us live from the court. Crisaldo, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Let's quickly recap what happened yesterday during the court proceedings.
Well, that's right, Aldrin. Sergeant Timothy Mathebula was grilled on the stand by the defense. You would recall that the defense has long contended that the crime scene had been contaminated or had been tampered with. And we heard from Sergeant Mathebula yesterday that they did not cordon off the scene the first time they arrived at the crime scene. And they said when they arrived there, they found Kelly Khumalo's uncle, Thabo Khumalo. And when they asked him what had taken place, this was after they'd received the call of a shooting incident that had taken place at the home. When they arrived there, they'd briefly gone inside the house. And when they asked what had happened, they say that they were basically told, or he was told, that those who have details of what transpired had already taken Senzo Meyiwa to the hospital. Thabo Khumalo, according to Sergeant Mathebula, had told them that Senzo Meyiwa had been shot, but he didn't have further particulars of what had taken place. And this is where Mathebula and his 3 other colleagues had left the crime scene, this without cordoning it off, and went to the hospital. And he says that they only realized that what they'd left behind was in fact a crime scene after they'd seen Senzo Meyiwa lying on a stretcher inside the hospital that he had been taken to. He was grilled by the defense about why they didn't initially cordon off the scene, why they didn't put that yellow tape that is usually put around the crime scene to ensure that no one is able to enter the house or even tamper with what may be found by police inside that house. And he says that they didn't realize at the time that it was a crime scene, only realizing after they'd returned a second time to the house that indeed something tragic had taken place there. He was grilled on that by the defense, and also some of what the defense says are contradicting statements. One statement that Mathebula had deposed in February of 2018, he says that he had noticed some blood stains that were inside the house, and this was at the time that Thabo Khumalo had been coming from inside the house to come basically meet them outside. But according to what he had basically told the court, was that they had only seen those blood stains the second time around. This is after they'd returned from the hospital. So the defense basically saying that the statement that was deposed in February of 2018 suggests that he had seen those blood stains the first time around when he had met Thabo Khumalo, and not what he basically told this court, that he'd only seen those blood stains the second time when they arrived at the house. So one of the other issues that was also brought up, you'd recall that a previous witness who was one of the neighbors of the Khumalos, and Tabiseng Mukiti, had basically told this court on the stand that when she was in the kitchen and police had been combing the scene, she'd pointed out to police of a bullet projectile that she had seen, and basically said to them, "Is this not what you are looking for?" And this is something that has been vehemently denied by Sergeant Mathebula, who says he knows nothing about that. As far as he's concerned, when they arrived at the scene for the second time, they had seen that bullet projectile that had been in the kitchen, where the crime scene, of course, was in a Vosloorus at the time. So with what we're seeing with the various police officers that have taken the stand thus far, and these are police officers who were some of the first responders to the incidents that had taken place there, is that the defense is suggesting that the crime scene had been tampered with. Police basically left the crime scene open for contamination, and had basically not done their job, or what was required to be done by some of the first responders in terms of the South African Police Service officers that had attended to that scene. Aldrin, this morning we're expecting Warrant Officer Thabo Mosia to take the stand once again. He was brief on the stand yesterday after lunch, and he told us he basically responded to the scene This was shortly after midnight. This would be now on the 27th of October 2014. He was the one who had basically collected evidence from the crime scene. What we saw yesterday inside court were pictures that were taken by a colleague of his, in which those pictures basically depict Mosia, taking swabs of some of the doors inside the house, where you would recall some of the witnesses who had taken the stand, including Tumelo Madlala, who said at some point he'd run towards one of the bedrooms that was inside the house. So hence police, what we saw in court yesterday was police taking swabs from some of the doors of those rooms in which some of these witnesses said they'd run to. This was after the two alleged intruders had entered the house on the night that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. So we're expecting him to give much detail about what it is that he did at the scene once he had arrived there. But then once again, we're expecting the defense, once he's done with his evidence in chief, we're expecting the defense, to try and poke holes in whatever he continues to tell this court, because the defense, of course, maintains that, police, from what we've seen in their cross-examination, that police did not do what was required from them initially, leaving room for the scene to be contaminated. We've heard of statements previously, from some of the witnesses who had claimed that, the crime scene had been cleaned, there'd been some bottles that had been removed, or cans of alcohol that had been removed. Maggie Peary, who we now know is one of the neighbors and is also related to Nthabiseng Mokiti, who previously took the stand, where one of the statements says that Maggie Peary had basically tried to clean some aspects of the house, saying that she did not want police to see when they arrived that people had been drinking inside the house. So we're expecting the defense also to put some of those to the current witness who will take the stand at 10 o'clock. This is Warrant Officer Thabo Mosia. You would recall he told us court yesterday that he had been on standby duty on that evening, and when he received the call from a Brigadier Ndlovu, he says Brigadier Ndlovu did not give him the address of where this incident had taken place. So before he went to the scene, he had first gone to the Vosloorus police station to understand from the control room where the crime scene was, and he'd then been directed to the hospital, and that's where he was to meet the police van that would escort him to the crime scene. So we're also expecting the defense very much to lean on how much time it took Thabo Mosia to get to the crime scene, and what could have possibly happened in between the time lapse of him having to go to the police station, then to the hospital, and then only going to the crime scene, as the defense tries to lean on what it says was the contamination of the crime scene where Senzo Meyiwa was killed.
Thank you so much, Criselda Lewis there. And of course, the trial resumes this morning at 10 o'clock. Stay tuned to the SABC News channel as we bring you the latest on the trial. Of course, as you just heard as well, that Thabo Mosia will continue with his testimony this morning.